Hello and a very warm welcome to the late breaking F1 podcast presented by Harry Eade, Sam Sage and me, Ben Hocking, reviewing the Dutch Grand Prix, the chaotic Dutch Grand Prix won by Max Verstappen, which is customary at this point, but that doesn't explain half of what went on today. Second place, Fernando Alonso. Third place, Pierre Gasly for Alpine. Rain at the beginning, rain at the end, some non-rain in the middle. Sam, that was, you've already mentioned that you've basically got a Scream compilation for this race, which is probably a first for the year.
Yeah, I mean, I've those who can't see, but if you're watching on YouTube, then hello. I've got a tea here because I've realised my throat hurts, actually, from screaming that much whilst watching the race. It was a bonanza of wet weather to dry weather transitions, and just saying that podium really doesn't explain it, considering that Gasly came from 12th place on the grid to pick up that third place. And what a wild ride we really had there for I reckon, I'm just going to say it, race of the season, I reckon.
I mean, the bar was low, but I think, yeah, it's pretty fair shout.
That is true, but still, it claims it for me.
Start of the race was days ago.
Literally, yeah.
I mean, Alonso overtook two people in turn 3. Literally,
and that was the most boring part of the race.
I know.
that was sweet.
Sauce.
That corner, we said it at the time. He just does what everyone else, the opposite of everyone else.
I know.
Every time.
It's great. Anyway, yeah, I'm sure we'll get onto that and much, much more. We'll be discussing Ferrari and how they got on, Mercedes and their strategic problems. But we'll start with the race out front. We'll start with Red Bull because Sergio Perez pulled a bit of a blinder to go into the pits for intermediate tyres early on, led the race for a few laps at least, and then Max Verstappen decided that's enough of that. And we'll talk about that strategic element in a little bit. Just to start, though, he came into the pits for wet weather tyres late on in the Grand Prix, at which point the red flag came out. We thought at first it might well have been a decision that cost him 3 or 4 positions. As it happens, they reinstated it back to where he was in third place. Sam, what did you make of the decision from Red Bull to pit Perez at that point when a red flag was plausible? And what do you make of the FIA's decision to go back to the way that it was a lap before?
This felt like such a massive overcompensation for Max Verstappen undercutting Perez the first time. We heard the radio from Perez, has Max undercut us? And they're like, yep, yes he has. And it's like, we were leading, I was 12 seconds in front, Max Verstappen was driving Star Trek Enterprise in hyperspace, while Sergio Perez was quite literally running around the track on his own legs. That's the difference in speed they seem to be able to carry. And then all of a sudden, Max Verstappen is 7-8 seconds up the road. So you get this wet weather transition and you see Esteban Ocon take the darest of all daring moves and go on the wet tyres straight away, and actually seems to be a great call, even though he complained about it. So Sergio Perez follows in. But after that incident that brought out the red flag with the rain coming down that level, we both said it when we were watching it, going, this has got to be a red flag. They will throw a red flag. And the fact that pretty much every team, Alonso carries on, Gasly carries on, Hamilton carries on as well, Sainz, and yet, they seem to throw themselves in. Perez hits the wall on the entry to the pit lane. He then ends up speeding in the pit lane. It was a real calamity of Emmas. Emmas? Sorry to all Emmas listening to this.
Blimey, poor Emma.
Poor Emma.
So many Emmas.
Sorry, Emma. It's been a long day. A calamity of errors, which is ironic for that sentence to be wrong. That you gained absolutely nothing for, and it ended up costing you the podium that I think on the first strategy call to go into Inters before everyone else was a blinder, and it just went down the toilet so quickly. I mean, there was enough water on the track to flush it, that's for sure. But yeah, I don't know what Red Bull were trying to do. I think they suddenly went, we've wronged Sergio on our side by not maybe paying attention to a possible undercut and keeping Sergio competitive. Let's do something now. The opportunity has arisen, and they just didn't pay attention to what was going on with the rest of the track and the conditions that were coming on. The red flag seemed inevitable. So I'm really surprised they brought him in. He obviously then got stuck behind that red light section at the end of the pit lane where the red flag had come out, so he closed the pit lane. In terms of the countback on where Sergio Perez belongs, I personally think that he should have had to have started behind Lewis Hamilton. I don't enjoy this go back to the lap before and then give you the order. I do, and they kind of did it a bit half and half, because obviously Sergio Perez pitted, Gasly and Alonso immediately went past, but Hamilton had also kind of gone past the entrance to the pit lane when the red flag had come out. So it's kind of like they went, a certain amount of time can be allowed before we do the count back. And it was very confusing because in theory, if you go a whole lap back, well, Alonso and Gasly should still be behind Perez for the restart of the race.
Wasn't Alonso ahead because
Yes.
Perez spun?
Oh, yes, of course.
But Gasly would have been
Gasly,
behind.
yes, sorry, fair point. Thank you for correcting me. So it just feels like they kind of pick and choose at what point they're counting back to, which, I don't love. And they've done it separately in different races as well. We've had a very clear evidence that, like, the red flag count back will go back to, let's say it happened on 65, the start of lap 64. Very much like what happened at Australia, I think. Whereas this time around, it felt like they did it from kind of 15 seconds into a certain period. It was all a bit confusing. Didn't really like how they did it. And I think that Sergio Perez probably should have restarted that section in 6th place rather than the third. Third, thank you. That I think he got a little bit lucky to get away with. I mean, obviously he was punished with speeding in the pit lane, but I do think it was a little generous, fortuitous for him.
What do you think, Harry? First on the Red Bull decision and then the FIA's decision.
The Red Bull decision was a bit odd, I thought, given you used the word inevitable, and it's exactly the word I would have used. The red flag, as soon as Zhou is in the barriers at turn 1, we kept saying, well, that's a red flag. It's going to be a red, because the amount of rain that was coming down.
It was a river.
It was a river. So I get why, I understand why because you'd look stupid if you didn't pit onto the wet tyres and everyone else did, but I just thought what Alonso did, and Aston Martin did, and Gasly as well, to stay out there was an obvious one, because there was no way that was continuing as green flag running. So, I guess it was safety car, but there's no way it was continuing under that either. So, yeah, odd call for that one with Perez, but I could sort of understand it. The count back thing, I think they counted it back to like the end of sector 2 or something of lap 65, right?
Yeah, but that just doesn't make sense.
No, I
to do so.
I agree. It's an odd one to call it back to. I can kind of understand why, because I don't think I've ever seen a red flag thrown and then a car is in the pit lane already. I mean, it must have happened at some point, but that's an odd one to be stuck in the pit lane when the red flag's thrown. So I can see why they've done that, because I guess they might have come out in a different place. But yeah, you're right. The rest of them, Hamilton and co, were already through. So yeah, it was quite chaotic. So I understand sort of why they've made that call to count it back. But yeah, the rule should just be like a blanket rule. You count back to the lap before.
But with the Sector 2 thing, Gasly hadn't passed Perez at that point, had he? So he got to go through. Alonso obviously already passed because of the spin.
Yeah.
But Gasly hadn't already passed him. He passed him when Perez was in the pit lane.
Yeah.
So how does that work if they've gone back to Sector 2?
Because at the end of Sector 2 of that lap, I guess Gasly was still behind him. I think that's how they've worked it out.
Right.
Anyway, but I agree. Confusing, to say the least, and they should, just make, FIA, make it simple. Just have like a blanket rule. It's a count back a lap, and we go from there.
Yeah, that seems fair.
I'd certainly say it was a strategic blunder from Red Bull to bring Perez in at that point. The fact that it probably doesn't make the top 10 strategic blunders on the day says a lot about how it went out there. But yeah, I think this wasn't the right call from Red Bull. And ultimately, I was like both of you, just say, okay, this is a red flag. I think Zhou Guanyu going into the barriers was one thing. And I thought at that point, okay, they can still clear that under safety car. So that bit wasn't too bad. But then there was one shot of like just from turn 1 going back down to the start finish straight where you could just see all of the water piling up. That was the shot for me that was like, yeah, this is red flag. Like slam dunk red flag. This is going to happen. And it was just a matter of not if, but when. Is it going to happen in 30 seconds time or in 2 minutes time? I couldn't see it going anything beyond that. So it makes sense for Red Bull just to hold on like some of the other teams did. And I think they can count themselves lucky that they didn't lose out as a result of the decision that they took. In terms of the FIA and their decision to count back to Sector 2, I think I agree with you that it would be cleaner just to go to the lap before. It's a confusing situation, and I think you're going to have advantaged and disadvantaged parties that are always going to disagree with whatever decision you make. But as we often point out with stewarding, it's the consistency, right? it's got to be consistent. So I think for the sake of just making it clean and easy, yes, I think the lap before would probably make sense. The other reason I think that's probably a good idea is that the situation I'm talking about here, where it would have benefited Perez to just stay out on intermediate tyres. Okay, strategically, it makes sense. From a safety perspective, we don't really want to be encouraging that. And I saw a few people suggest maybe they made the decision to not pull him back a few places and to pick a point where he doesn't get disadvantaged was actually a bit of a, hey, Perez came in for the right appropriate tyres for the conditions and he's not being disadvantaged as a result of this, almost as a sign for the other drivers that that's what they want them to do. And certainly it would have, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but it would have sucked to an extent to see that someone making a smart decision to go on tyres that were appropriate for the weather being disadvantaged as a result of that. So I think that's something they need to maybe consider, the FIA, is that I don't like the idea of drivers going around on intermediate tyres, risk of aquaplaning at any moment and having what Zhou Guanyu had happen to him. I don't like that being a prospect because the alternative is what Perez did and you might get caught out by a red flag. It's a tough situation, but I think it's one to at least bear in mind.
I completely disagree. I don't care if you're coming for the right tyres. I think it should be reset the moment the red flag sign comes up. I almost feel like Mr. Steward hits button for red flag, takes screenshot of race order, and that is the race order. You know, I've hit the red flag, we've red flagged, that's the race order. And I don't care about, I was coming in for right tyres, I should get a bonus. No, I don't care. It's clever, it's good strategy, it's good call to be like, the red flag's coming, I'm just going to... And we saw it at the start of the race when there were drivers going around on soft tyres when the track was soaking wet. And there was no issue with that then. There was no kind of red flag, they're on the wrong tyres. And I think at that moment when we start to not adjust rules, because that's not what you're saying, Ben, at all, but when we start to give a swing a little bit to those who are making the safe decision rather than, it's sport, we're being a little bit risky, we are driving around 200 miles an hour, then I think on that point you lose a bit of the risk for reward factor. And as much as I agree that safety is, incredibly important and it's something we should always consider, I don't want that to be the first thing in drivers' minds. Obviously be safe in general manner, but if you can claim something and you've got a risk versus reward, you put it in the wall or you stick it out and go 30 seconds, I've got to last for 30 seconds and I could gain 2-3 places. I want that to be a decision in Formula 1. And it's the same with racing in the wet. We're not allowed to race in the wet anymore. We had a rolling start. It was drier than it was at one point when we were actually racing and they were fine with it. And I just think that Formula 1 in terms of wet weather ability has gone out the window. And I know the cars are hard because they're ground effect cars and it's very difficult to maintain downforce in wet weather. But you're the best drivers in the world. Saw it out. You saw how good Sergio Perez's first choice was. He nailed that change to intermediates. And some people are still on softs and they got no benefit or no benefit from, for safety reasons. So I see the point you're making, but I do very much disagree with it.
What I want to avoid is Nürburgring 07.
That is, yeah, but that is a real kind of,
I don't think we were far away from that.
I think it's a fair point.
I think, yeah, I'm not...
Sam Sage hates safety, by the way. It's the title of this episode.
That is.
What did you make of... Let's go a bit earlier in the race and go back to Perez and Verstappen, because Perez went into intermediates at the first time of asking. Verstappen stays out for an extra lap. But of course, with Verstappen bearing down on him, Verstappen then goes back onto the dry tyres first before Perez does. And all of a sudden, Verstappen is undercutting Perez, and Perez is asking why that has been able to happen. Sam, what did you make of how that played out?
I mean, firstly, that call from Perez to go on to intermediates was a blinder. We, even in our qualifying review that we did yesterday, none of us brought up the fact that Perez started way down the top 10 order, beating out by a lot of drivers, in theory, slower cars. Because it feels like maybe it's just become the norm now, so we're not really raising it as often, which is not a good thing for Sergio Perez. But, he pulled an absolute blinder strategically on that first call, and it made up entirely for the deficit that he started in. And that's the kind of risk I want on drivers, right? It might not have gotten any wetter, he might have been on the wrong tyre, and he might have fallen all the way back down the order. But it didn't, it paid off. The same for Zhou Guanyu, who found himself in second place, which was absolutely sensational as a call. Firstly, I was in shock and awe at just how much faster Max Verstappen was once he got onto the same tyre as Sergio Perez. The fact that it was a 12-second gap, and I think in 2 laps he had taken the gap down to 7 seconds. There was
1 lap over 4 seconds.
Which is mind-blowing, right? The tyres aren't any difference in age. Perez has been on his for 2 laps. Max has just put on fresh ones at this point. There is no real difference. If you did that on softs for 2 drivers in most teams, the gap would be a couple of tenths, in terms of difference of speed. But 4 seconds a lap is quite, I would describe it as filthy.
4, Jeremy.
4? That's insane. It's disgusting.
It is absolute filth.
It is. It's dirty. Go and wash the timing board down because it's a mess. But then the fact that we didn't hear the conversation on the Red Bull pit wall with the drivers properly that discussed Max coming in early. He just came in early, which is really interesting because usually driver who's in the lead on the track gets first call of pit stop. That's tradition. I'm not saying we should stick to it. I'm not saying that that's the point. But, that is considered F1 tradition, that if you're the lead driver on track, you tend to get first call in the pit lane. And that isn't the case. Checo seemed almost a bit bamboozled that Max Verstappen had come in already and was flying on the soft tyre. And it's so interesting to see how Perez called this blinder of a call to go on intermediates, to have such a lapse in concentration and understanding of the track conditions to go, it's no longer wet, softening out the appropriate time. Because you think if you can go one way, you should be able to go the other. But Max Verstappen almost realised the mistake he found himself in, which is hard when you're the race leader to make that right call. You don't want to be too risky. But to stick on those soft tyres, and he was past him so easily. He flew round that track, and he had come and gone by the time that Sergio Perez had come out that pit lane. So I think it shows a little bit of Red Bull favouritism over the pit lane. And I don't blame them. The guy's won 9 in a row. The guy's a 2-time world champion. He is their future. He's their long-term. You don't want to start iffing him off, do you, really? We're a family show, folks, so I won't swear.
Iffing him.
Iffing him, not really a phrase. My point is here, you don't want to start upsetting your main man for the next, 8 to 10 years, in theory. Max Verstappen could be at that team longer if he fancies it. So Sergio Perez is, this is going to sound really harsh, a stopgap between the next person to come and sit in the second driver's seat of that Red Bull. He's doing a job for them. Doesn't matter if he gets upset, really. He's here for 1, 2 seasons at a max? Oh, well, he'll get on with it. This is the best car he's ever going to have. But it was very surprising to see how blatant it was and see just how surprised Sergio Perez was over the radio, I think. Also, be more bullish, Sergio. Throw the mantle down and go, I'm coming in this lap. It's soft tyres. I'm leading. I'm coming in. There's only one pit box, so you got to take me. Otherwise, we're both screwed.
Do a Leclerc.
Yeah.
Charles Leclerc.
Just scream at him.
I am coming in.
Ironically, no tyres ready.
I mean, well,
I can't get onto that. That's going to be my favourite part of the entire podcast.
Oh, no. Oh, no, indeed. What did you make of how that played out, Harry?
Yeah, it was. I'm with Sam. It's quite a blatant move on Red Bull's part here to just. Again, we haven't heard all the radio conversations, but what we picked up from, I guess, commentary was that it wasn't Max's call, it was Red Bull's call or the team's call, and they brought Verstappen in before Perez. Having said that, the rate of catching there was between Verstappen and Perez, it's a done deal. Or they've just avoided a bit of embarrassment for Checo on track, basically, because they've made it look like an undercut. It's like
using a different class of car.
Yeah, they've made it look like it's an undercut when, in fact, Verstappen was going to be passing that lap, probably, if not the lap later, the rate of knots he was catching him at. So, questionable. Not questionable, but the the process of that when your lead driver doesn't get the call on when they get the first stop, especially considering the last time they did. So it's not dodgy, but a little bit dodgy. A little bit dodge.
Not dodgy, but a bit dodgy.
A bit dodge. But I don't blame them because Verstappen was just flying along. So I think they've just saved Checo a bit of face there.
Just a bit of face.
Just a little bit of face.
He's only got a little bit left now.
Well, out of the 4 seconds a lap, there's not much face left.
God.
Exactly. So, yeah, I don't blame them.
I feel like, because it was very obvious that Verstappen had such a pace advantage over Perez. I feel like the 4 seconds a lap thing, there's surely something beyond pure pace to explain it in either the tires were working very well straight out the blankets and there was tire temperature involved, or Perez maybe was a bit slower somewhere on the circuit, in particular, one particular corner. Because I think at that point, it probably went back to something like 2 seconds, which is still a massive advantage for Verstappen. But I don't think pure pace-wise, it was quite 4. But having said that, people won't like it. I understand the decision they made. And I do genuinely think that it was to avoid Fernando Alonso and any undercut opportunities from Aston Martin. I appreciate they had built quite a gap over Alonso and the rest of the field, but we saw the pace that Piastri and Albon were going at on those dry tyres, and it was 5 seconds a lap faster than the likes of Verstappen out front. So I can understand why they pit the second driver first to avoid Fernando Alonso and then pit the first place driver Perez afterwards. It's not the first time we've seen that strategy played out. I remember it happened, I think, this is a very random one, Singapore a few years ago when Ferrari were actually good and they were winning races. You might remember that Leclerc was leading the race. Vettel had to come into the pits first. Vettel ends up winning the race because he gets the undercut on Leclerc, but he was doing it not to overtake Leclerc, although he did, but it was to protect from the third place driver, which I think is what Red Bull were doing here. I might be being naive with that, and it was actually just a ploy to get Verstappen in front, but I think they were doing it for defensive reasons. But yeah, Max was, in all honesty, Verstappen was finding a way past, whether it was then 10 laps later at the next pit stop, on the last lap having to get 5 seconds on Perez. He'd have found a way. He just had, from the first practice all the way through to the race, this was, even by Verstappen standards, a very dominant weekend over his teammate.
Embarrassing.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a short break. We'll leave Red Bull for now, but we'll be focusing on Mercedes after the break. Mercedes came into the weekend with quite a bit of optimism. Didn't quite
Hamilton
work
win,
out
mate.
for them.
Hamilton win.
Yeah, was that what you said?
Yeah. We'll get onto that.
The funny thing is, Lewis Hamilton seemed to have very, very good pace. Unfortunately, Mercedes' strategic team didn't have very good pace. They were very slow to make decisions early on. Really cost both drivers. Of course, we know George Russell retired or finished outside of the points anyway. But certainly it was a tough day for both Mercedes drivers up until that point. Sam, what did you make of how their race went? Because Russell starting on the second row, it was looking good, and it just crumbled as soon as decisions had to be made.
I think, we discussed this, didn't we, while the race was going? I genuinely think that Mercedes need to fire their strategy department. I think
The whole department.
I don't
Off you
think
go.
they've been good at strategy calls ever. And I think the dominance of the car allowed them to be bulletproof, essentially, for the last, from 2014 through to 2020.
I think they're a bit rusty.
No, I don't think they were ever good. I just think the car was 30 seconds up the road all the time. But it doesn't matter if they make the wrong call or they're 2 laps out because they've got the pace to rectify it. Someone like Hannah Schmitz at Red Bull is sensational at planning strategy. It is ruthless, it is efficient, and it gets the job done. And they were so good with their strategy when they were behind Mercedes all those years that I think they have really finessed this to a T. And I think just like their drivers and their team's approach, they are so good at nailing the strategy element as well. There is no emotion involved in it. It is get the best result possible. Whereas with Mercedes, there's arguments over the radio now. You heard George Russell come over the radio and say, this was a hilarious phrasing, I was forecast a podium. Sorry, George.
I requested one podium.
Yeah. I've ordered a podium,
BBC
please.
weather app.
Yeah. At 4 o'clock, I'll be in second place. And how the F has this happened? You're in 18th place. Lewis Hamilton at some point was in last place. And we followed him down the time board. He starts 13th. By the end of lap 1, he's 14th. Then the rain comes. He doesn't pit. And he's the only person at the back rolling around on dry tyres.
I'll get onto my point in a minute. If the rain was coming, which everyone said, Toto Wolff himself even said it on the grid, why was he on the medium tyres?
Yeah, like, why? It doesn't make any sense. And then the call just kept coming. Then some of the drivers from the intermediates went onto the dry tyres. Lewis Hamilton went onto the intermediate tyres, which was confusing because the track was drying up at that point. And yes, he made some moves, but unlike Albon, who just stuck it out on the softs that entire time and managed to pretty much maintain grid position the entire time it went on, Hamilton flipped back and forth, and only in the last kind of 25 laps when Hamilton put on his final set of softs did he suddenly seem to unlock incredible pace. He hunted down Norris far quicker than I ever thought he was going to. It was about 3.5 second gap at one point. We looked away, we looked back again, the gap was a second. He had caught up to him by 2 seconds that lap. It was sensational, and the same strategy. Their strategy calls were absolutely bewildering today, and I can see why George Russell came across the radio and said, I don't know how I'm the one that's all the way back here, while Pierre Gasly's floating around in 3rd, 4th place. Kevin Magnussen at one point from the pit lane was in 7th. Zhou was, fighting with Sergio Perez at one point for the victory, and both the Mercedes drivers at one point were 18th and 20th place. It was so diabolically bad that I don't know how you were once 8-time consecutive Constructors' champions. Thank your engineering department, because that's what kept you afloat. I do not think they've ever been good at strategy, but I think they're being found out now.
Harry, you put George Russell under pressure going into this weekend, and I think by all accounts he generally had an okay weekend from a pace perspective, but it feels like the team might have let himself and indeed Lewis Hamilton down here.
Yeah, I feel for Russell actually, because I think he was having a pretty decent weekend. That contact with Norris, by the way, the lightest of contacts, but out you go, son.
Yeah,
weird one. Yeah, I'm with Sam. Some very odd calls. Do you know what? Then it's not even the calls were odd; they were just slow. Yeah. They were making the right calls, but like laps too late. So the Hamilton one where he was the last one to put inters on. Obviously, some of them stayed on slicks for the entire first rain shower. Albon. There were a few others like Bottas and Hulkenberg maybe, but at that point they'd committed, and obviously it paid off for Albon because he came out the other side and he still had slicks on. For Hamilton, they were the last to pit for the inters, but by that point they were too late for that call because they're so far back.
Yeah, they
might as well have stuck with just staying on the slick. So yeah, just slow calls, and not great, because you're right, Ben. I think that car has some decent pace in it, and to come away with only 8 points in the end from just Hamilton.
Yeah. Don't qualify third for no reason.
Yeah, it's they're going to be scratching their heads on that one, and they probably need to have a look at what their strategy team are doing, because we're used to Ferrari making bad strategy calls, but I think that was at a Ferrari level of bad strategy.
Speaking of strategy calls, obviously they had the split strategy where when the safety car came out, Hamilton stayed on his soft tyres, which may be 6 or 7 laps old. Russell pits onto the hard tyre. Why not mirror Hamilton's strategy at that point, which was clearly the faster strategy? That clearly worked out far better.
I mean, Russell's one wasn't far off being pulled off, but I think by the end of it, before the rain hit again, it wasn't working. But I think that was an okay. I understand that one.
That moment where Russell nearly lost it with Hamilton right behind him. That was one of many a scream. Lots of poo.
So much poo.
It was a dirty moment.
Yeah, Jesus. George, mate. Come on.
Terrifying.
That is terrifying. Wipe out both Mercedes in one go. So yeah, not a great race for Mercedes overall today. I think the drivers actually did a pretty decent job, but they weren't really given the chance to do much more.
Yeah, I would certainly say you're right, Sam. You picked out George Russell's 3rd place qualifying effort. And the irony is I think they were a better race car than they were a qualifying car, which is what they usually are. But certainly if you compare them to, say, McLaren, who maybe had a minor edge on them on Saturday, it seemed as if today it was Mercedes that had the race pace advantage. And I don't know if you're comparing Hamilton, certainly Hamilton and maybe Russell as well. Verstappen was quicker than both of them. Maybe Alonso, but I don't think and Perez is probably in the mix as well, but I don't think any of the other cars who finished in front of Hamilton or, of course, in front of Russell, I don't think they had the pace that Mercedes had. So this is a massive missed opportunity. Strategically, you're right. You've used all the correct words: diabolical, woeful, all the rest of them. they all fit the bill on this occasion because, yeah, you've got to commit one way or the other. You've either got to commit in the way that Zhou or Gasly did, in that they came in straight away, or Perez did, and you go straight to the intermediate tyres. Fine. I didn't even mind that much Lewis Hamilton starting on the medium tyres because in 12th it was something different. Like I know the rain was coming, but with the other 19,
what, the rain?
No, I don't get baffled by rain. I understand that concept. I meant everyone on softs. Toto Wolff goes, we've got rain in less than 20 minutes. The rain is there by the end of lap 1. You got your radar. He's the only man on mediums. I get what you're saying, Ben. It's something different if the rain doesn't come, but it was coming. Everyone else knew it was coming.
I just think if he was inside the top 10, I'd have been like, what are you doing? But I think it might have been worth a gamble that if it was lighter than expected and intermediates weren't needed, then suddenly he's in a good spot. So I was fine with that call, but certainly you've either got to pit on lap 1 for those intermediate tyres, or you do what Albon did and you just stay out there. But yeah, they just completely mistimed the pit stop. In terms of Hamilton having the soft tyres and Russell having the hard tyres after dry tyres were required, I was fine with both calls. I think it was probably worth it to go on the hard tyres from George Russell's perspective. I think given the timing of the second lot of rain, it was probably worth it. And from Lewis Hamilton's perspective, I think he recovered absolutely everything he could. But the damage was done by that point. It kind of didn't matter what their strategy was for when it was dry because they were having to fight back a minute's worth of time. And the crucial call was the first one that they just didn't make. And I think there's some truth to your argument, Sam, in that they haven't needed to be good at strategy for a long time. But certainly the last couple of years, this isn't an isolated incident. There have been a few calls where they're just seemingly a little bit slow to go ahead. And to be honest, you brought it up on the qualifying review as well with Lewis Hamilton in Q2. It's almost just a reluctance to go a bit bold and almost just waiting to see what everyone else does, which is something you can do when you're out in the lead. And indeed, Red Bull did that a couple of times out there today, where you've built up such a gap that you do have 1 lap or 2 laps worth of a buffer to work out whether it definitely is the right decision. Mercedes don't have that in the situation they're in. 8 points is a long way from what they should have secured here. It really should have been 1 driver on the podium and probably the other one in the top 5. And that's pretty conservative as well. They definitely had more on the table.
Yeah, if especially from Hamilton's side, obviously Russell retires. If Hamilton's side get that first call right, I think they comfortably beat Gasly to the final spot on the podium. That car was much faster. But I miss Hamilton making these calls from the car. And Russell did it when he first came into Mercedes. He was kind of like, I want this. And we almost kind of criticised him for how vocal he was over the radio. But he was being bold and making these calls. And we're not seeing that anymore. We're not seeing him go, I want these tyres. And it was a bit odd because Hamilton was the team leader. But he seems to be afraid to make these calls at the moment. And it's now no one is making the calls. Someone has to take the helm. And no one is.
Should we review some bold predictions?
No.
Probably not.
Let's review some bold predictions.
Good.
Sam, you said that Oscar Piastri would finish on the podium.
Quite a bit disappointing in this one, you know what, Ben? Because I feel like it was so on the cards for so much of the weekend, and then they just kept going backwards. The Q3 one was disappointing. Norris obviously qualified second, and I thought Piastri was going to be right there with him, let down. And then their calls strategically, not good. Piastri kept overtaking cars, but it just never got there, let down. I really do think I can't buy a bold prediction point at the moment. It was a tough one this weekend.
Harry, what was your bold prediction?
Ooh. I think I said Verstappen might not win.
Well, the weather tried.
Gave it a good go, didn't he?
After all that.
I swear to
You
God,
must.
man.
Sergio Perez in the lead by 12 seconds. Here we go.
Yeah,
now it's
saw that
7.
gap coming down.
Yeah.
My dreams
Like
crumbling around me.
of time.
Good news. I said an Alpine was going to be in the top 4, so I get mine right.
It's the wrong one, mate. What did you say?
Oh, let's not get bogged down in the details. I might have said it was Esteban Ocon. I saw a mid-20s Frenchman on the podium who races for Alpine. I don't know.
Sorry, mate. I think you need to get the abacus out.
You know, as soon as I made that prediction as well, I was like, that's really bold. Why didn't I just go with Alpine? That would have been a bold enough call to say one of the Alpines in the top 4. I didn't need to go that bold, and I've cost myself.
As Sam said earlier on, it's actually it's actually worse than getting it completely wrong.
Yeah.
The other one is on the podium.
I would rather have just, if I were you, I'd rather have just had both Alpines out.
Do you also know what was a prediction of mine this weekend? Pole Verstappen, first Verstappen, second Perez, third Alonso. That was on the cards for 3/4 of the race.
Oh, man. Yeah, at one point, it would have been Verstappen, Perez, Alonso, Gasly. Well, if it had been Ocon, that would have been great.
How many full houses have we had like that? You got one where you got your most recent bold prediction, right? I think, where you got bold.
You weren't here. That was me and Ben had exactly the same bold prediction and 1-2 pole 1-2 3.
Yeah, and then I did it the very first race where I got that first bold prediction right, and I thought I'm in for a winner. Here we go, and now I'm last.
Slam dunk.
Yeah.
So not a great weekend for bold predictions. If you are keeping count and you've got your abacuses out, nothing's changed. No one got any right. I was also thinking as well with our under pressure submissions, I put Logan Sargent under pressure. That didn't work out very well. Harry put George Russell under pressure. That didn't work out very well. The only one that did is Sam putting Zandvoort under pressure,
Delivered.
which I thank you for, because,
Yeah, I mean, Zandvoort the postman, because he delivers, honestly.
Even on a Sunday.
Even on a Sunday. Yeah, I mean, the weather definitely played its part in the drama. And I think if we got an all-dry race, I don't know how thrilling it would have been because...
We'll take it.
But, sometimes a sprinkling of rain can ease the pain. I'll take that one because that was race of the season so far. It's fantastic.
Okay. Well, we've just had a topic on Mercedes strategic woes, but don't worry. After we come back from the break, we're chatting about Ferrari.
I'm so excited for this segment.
Oh, no.
Moving on. Ferrari.
Oh.
If it's any consolation for Ferrari, they might not have got all their strategy decisions right today, but at least they can blend in somewhat with the other teams. Carlos Sainz secured a pretty good finish, managed to finish P5 in the end. Not such a good day for Charles Leclerc, who just dropped until he retired. 10 points, which is 2 more than Mercedes and more than McLaren as well. So maybe they consider this a
win.
But, Sam, try and summarize what happened with Ferrari's day, because one lap in, we were already laughing.
I mean, I imagine that Ferrari have come out and gone, yeah, you could bring 4 tyres to a pit stop, but we could take 10 points home. See you later. They have kind of run off with the burglar that is George Russell, with Russell's points at that point, haven't they? They've stolen them and run away. It was a shambles. I mean, Matt Gallagher, who you might know from P1, big Leclerc fan, he was sat above the... that's the yellow car for me. He was sat above the Ferrari pit garage, and there is a photo that he's taken of Ferrari preparing for the pit stop for Charles Leclerc. Not a single engineer is holding a tyre.
Well, the car's halfway in the pit box.
No tyres in sight, apart from the ones that are currently on the car, which, if you're aware of what pit stops are, you might be new to F1. The tyres need to be changed. They didn't bring us... There's a recording of us watching it. I'm screaming at the engineer because one of them's just holding a blue stick. Don't know what that blue stick does, but it was irrelevant for the pit stop.
Yeah,
the race.
I'm assuming it's what they used to...
Change the wing.
Yeah, let's give the flap
angle.
adjust.
Yeah.
But you're right. Go and do some help.
He's just standing there with it in his hand. Honestly, if that was not a pure encapsulating moment for Ferrari's strategy, all in one go, I don't know what is. They got everything wrong. The tyres were wrong at the wrong times. They were missing tyres at the wrong times. Charles Leclerc, what was he doing for most of the race? I mean, I gather that he picked up a bit of damage, and it kind of seemed to low-key say when they retired the car, it's getting worse. But at no point this weekend has he looked good, comfortable, happy with how the car's going, or even good in himself. Carlos Sainz, once again, can't pick up a podium and still hasn't got one for this season. And I think if Pierre Gasly can pick up a podium, Carlos Sainz should be able to pick up a podium this race. Less radio while he's having a battle at that halfway around the corner is going on. They just seem to be in utter chaos when it comes to general organisation. I tell you what, lads, Go out to Apple Store, get yourself an iPad, and then put everything you need in the calendar in there, and it will really help you understand what's going on. Because
Sam knows.
Sorted my life right out. Generally, though, they are. I can't even go into the details of just how atrociously bad Ferrari are at understanding how a basic race from lap 1 to 72 seems to need to operate.
Go on.
They were not great. I don't think they were worse than Mercedes, which I think proves what a bad day Mercedes actually had. But the inherent lack of trust, and we mentioned this yesterday. Well, lack of tires, but the lack of trust there is between driver and team and strategy team, because that whole Leclerc debacle in the pit lane was Leclerc saying, "I want to come in for Inters," the team saying, "No, we think you should stay out," and Leclerc's going, "No, I'm in the pit lane now." Yeah. At which point, the team aren't ready, which, to be fair to the mechanics, they wouldn't be, because they've been told
that does happen.
But they've been told that Leclerc's not coming in, or Leclerc is coming in. So what I'm saying is the whole shambles around this is the driver doesn't trust the strategy team, and obviously then they can't react to when the car's in the pit lane. So just a mess. Like, I can't believe we've had another incident where Charles Leclerc is up on the jacks and there's no tyres on his car.
It might
no wheels on the wagon.
Be the funniest pit stop I've ever seen.
It's just the sheer panic.
Honestly, it's like they've decided to swap all the mechanics out for their kids for the day and gone, it's work experience, and then everyone's going, "Oh, I've forgotten that wheels have to go on the car." And
they weren't the only one. We saw Tsunoda with AlphaTauri. They had a similar incident where they weren't ready. But the thing is, for Ferrari, it's not isolated. This isn't like a one-off. We've seen it before. It's happened to them before. So there's some serious work for old Freddie Vast to do here, because I think there's a real issue in the fact that Leclerc doesn't trust what his team will do. And I think what Leclerc was doing was the right call, but the point is that there should be the two-way trust, that the team trusts what the driver is saying, seeing as he is the one on the track.
The one in the vehicle.
So, yeah, Ferrari, man. I mean, I don't really understand how Sainz got up there, to be honest.
No, I'm not going to lie. It just kind of appeared.
He was just sort of there. And I think it was pretty funny that when Alonso had his slow stop and Sainz was like, first podium of the year, on its way.
Yeah.
2 laps later. See you later, mate.
It was, I said, didn't I? I said, here we go. Sainz needs it. And then about a lap later, he was in 5th. And went, well, that's that first podium of the year. Gone again.
I'll finish this with a compliment to Sainz. His defending against Hamilton was pretty good in this last few laps.
We saw some really good defence across the whole race, actually.
Well, Japanese Minister of Defence, Yuki Tsunoda.
Yuki Tsunoda, what a baller he was.
Love it. So, right.
Oh, here we go, folks.
Buckle up.
The Leclerc coming into the pits after the first lap incident. Let's just focus on that for the moment. Leclerc, as you rightly say, has identified what the correct decision is. Ferrari, unsurprisingly, have come to the complete wrong conclusion. They've said, right, what's 1 + 1? And they've come back very confidently with 7. Leclerc is trying to override the Ferrari strategy team. And at this point, I can't blame him, because they have shown over and over again why a driver should not have any trust. He's probably seen Carlos Sainz on a few occasions snap back at the team and benefit as a result of that. And I think Leclerc, just based on this weekend as a whole, I think he has started to adopt that same mentality, which isn't great, but given the circumstances, I can understand why. One thing I would not necessarily disagree with, but one thing I want to pick up on what you said, Harry, in that the team weren't ready for the pit stop because the team themselves were saying stay out. I would say, just based on those conditions, even if the decision is stay out, the team should be ready for that pit stop, because it is chucking it down. Like, we knew as the race started, dry tyres, but rain was coming. That should mean all teams are on high alert at any point in the first 5-10 laps. Intermediate tyres could be needed at a moment's notice. So actually, even though the Ferrari decision was stay out, I still think all the teams should be there ready for that to happen, because a downpour could happen at any moment and they should just be ready for it. So I think they should have been there for that. Certainly, Could Leclerc have been more assertive over team radio to say, no, I am definitely coming in here? It felt like he was pretty assertive already, but, is there anything that could be done there? Ultimately, the fact that Leclerc still benefited from pitting then, despite the fact that the pit stop took 12 years, should really indicate how good of a decision it was to come in at that point. Obviously, we know Perez ended up with a double-digit lead, but the position Leclerc should have been in was second place, streaking away similar to Perez. Not at the same pace, because Red Bull and, Red Bull's quick. But certainly, he should have been clear of Zhou and of Gasly, who were on the same strategy, and they weren't. After that, I think they pretty much did okay. Carlos Sainz, I think they got his strategy right pretty much all day. Certainly far better than what McLaren were able to do, what Mercedes were able to do. Better than what Albon did, even though he made the most of that situation. Sainz still had a better strategy than he did. So I think from Sainz's perspective, they did all right. The problem is they were really slow. I actually think
pretty slow.
If I had to pinpoint what was the main problem this weekend, strategy or too slow, I would probably lean towards too slow, which isn't that's a rock and a hard place if I've ever heard one. But I think it was actually just they were really slow. Actually, I don't know. Let's just say it was a really boring race and there wasn't a lot of overtaking and not much happened. Dry conditions. Did they have the pace to finish 8th and 9th? Like, did they? I know Leclerc had damage, so it was tough to tell with him, but Sainz had to do a lot of defending. And I think a lot of that defending only came about because actually they got him up the grid enough strategy-wise. So the first lap, Leclerc, massive blunder. That was pretty awful. I think after that, there were worse teams.
The Liam Lawson pass on Charles Leclerc, despite the damage, I think really encapsulated in one moment what Ferrari's weekend looked like. Damaged, struggling at the back, slow, passed by a rookie on his debut race, which is the most chaotic Grand Prix you'll ever see.
Yeah, it was. This is a British commentary point, but when David Croft said, "Oh, I've just put a text across to ask if Leclerc might have damage," like, no, he's just been passed by Liam Lawson on pace. Of course he's got damage.
There's obviously something wrong with the car. Speaking of the UK commentary team, the level of British bias this weekend has been extreme. Every single decision that was going on related directly to what would happen to Lewis Hamilton had it been enforced or where people would come out. Every single call was, can Hamilton get close enough to Perez? And it's like, what about all the other drivers that are equally close to Perez? No mention of them at every turn. I just thought, you know what? There are some other drivers on the track that would like a mention.
Clutching at straws here.
Really struggling to keep it going.
Ugh.
Looking at two teams that fared quite well on the podium, Fernando Alonso in second for Aston Martin, Pierre Gasly in third for Alpine. Both teams, I think we can agree, very much in need of a podium. Certainly Aston Martin's second half of the first half of the year wasn't quite as strong. And Alpine just don't have anyone working for them anymore. So, Harry, what do you think about these two results? Do you think that they can kick on as a result of this? Or even if they're standalone, how much do they mean for the teams?
Look, for Alpine and Gasly, I think that was more the good strategy calls today rather than outright pace. But they were in it to win it, and they did very well. And to be fair to Gasly, he had good pace during the race. So it's not. I'm not saying it was complete luck, but I'd be surprised if they were then in similar position when we get to Monza, but you never know. Maybe LaPlan really is starting. Good Lord. For Alonso and Aston Martin, I think, they'll be quite encouraged by that because, again, they made the most of the situations today. But their pace was, I think, pretty good, or at least his was pretty good all weekend. He was sort of there or thereabouts. In qualifying, maybe he could have jumped Albon. I don't think he was quite on Russell's pace. If the Mercedes had been there, then it might have been a different story. But yeah, I think it was almost normal service resumed. Well, normal service being what was happening at the start of the year for Aston Martin. So I think they'll be encouraged by that. That being said, not sure they'll be looking forward to Monza quite so much next week. But Singapore is after that, so that's probably where their next focus is for a good result. But yeah, it was a timely podium, I think, for Aston Martin and Alonso.
Yeah, I mean, from Alpine's perspective, I think they just need to take whatever they're given. And certainly they've had 2 podiums at Zandvoort and Monaco. So if we can just go to high downforce circuits from now on, Alpine might be on the cards to win a championship eventually. But yeah, I don't think Alpine will actually have too much to fight for the rest of the year, which sounds weird, but I just don't see them catching up to anyone in front of them. And I don't see anyone behind them possibly competing with them. So I think they might be stuck in some weird middle ground from now until the end of the year. From Aston Martin's perspective, we established that this might well be a track that suits the car. And I think, as soon as the rain started coming down, it's just Alonso. You can tell he's grinning in his car. you can't see his face, but he is loving life at that point. So yeah, a much needed podium for Aston Martin, and 10 points for Ferrari, 8 for Mercedes. That comes at a good time, even though Lance Stroll wasn't able to contribute. But again, I think strategy played its part there. Sam, what did you make of those 2 results?
I think in terms of the Alpine result, this is much more a motivational lift for Gasly rather than it is for the overall team. I think they're quite aware that realistically, this is a bit of an exception track rather than the norm for them. This is not going to be status quo for the rest of the season. And they clearly are fantastic at downforce-related circuits. As much as, that Alpine was not the fastest car running around the circuit, Gasly put up a very staunch defence of all the cars behind him. And Sainz was, pressing hard, and they fought the fight with Albon and Alonso and everyone. He did a very good job, and I think that I want to also pat Gasly on the back because I've got my sausage out for him. Quite frankly,
no,
he's in front of Ocon now for points. So in teammate wars, woo! We're taking that one, Pierre. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward. Keep it up, Pierre. Keep it up. This is the real L Plan, folks. The plan is coming to Sam.
Were you the only one who said that?
Yes.
Oh no,
it's a big dub. Wesley.
It's not going well.
So I appreciate that, mate. Thank you. Good stuff. Keep it up. Well done. Singapore again. Yeah, they're going to be screwed when it comes to Monza, though. In terms of Aston Martin were very clear that the update that they put on the car before the summer break was actually disadvantaging them. And they're aware of it, which is great. The worst thing about a problem is not understanding the problem. At least now they know what the problem is, how to fix it. And I think that as much as we've all agreed Monza will not be their strongest circuit, I don't think we're going to see them return to the depths of 10th and 11th places, which they were starting to encounter come the end of the first half of the season. It really was looking like they were drifting back towards more of an Alpine level of pace rather than Aston Martin being up there with McLaren and Mercedes. Lance Stroll is the problem overall for Aston Martin. Once again, you give Alonso a car that can perform, it delivers. Lance Stroll, regardless of how bad strategy was for him, there was enough chaos in there today, and that car, in theory, should have had the pace to start cutting through the field. We never once saw him doing what Norris, Piastri, Hamilton, Russell did, and that car was equal to those cars' paces, and not once did he manage to quickly cut through the likes of Tsunoda, Albon, who were fighting on the edge of the points, the Haas guys who were all right this weekend, strategy calls were good from them. So he is letting the side down. It really is a bit like Alonso is turning up and there is a child sat in the other car who is just having fun and kicking about for a bit. He's not contributing. So while it's good and it's a return to form for Alonso, they need someone else in that other seat who can bring the team together, because every other team, I think, has a pretty consistent lineup where both sides of the garage, if given the right occasion, can bring in very good points for them.
Harry, I reckon it's time for driver of the day.
Oh, damn it. I thought I was ready, but I wasn't.
Too busy looking out the window, mate.
The verdict is in. You're the driver of the day. You're the driver of the day. You're good at driving.
Who have you got, Harry?
Max Verstappen was pretty good, wasn't he?
He had a good race, yeah.
I think Alonso, obviously, he got the popular vote. I think Alonso had a good race today. Gasly, and again, I know everybody's said this, strategy helped him, but he did well today.
His defense against Sainz was very good.
Yeah. But yeah, I'll go for the obvious one because I've gone first. Max Verstappen, he was in sublime form.
Subliminal's a very different message.
That's not what I meant.
No.
Sublime form. Yeah, I mean, we would have spoken about it, but the gap closing down that gap to Perez alone was enough. That's filth. So yeah, I'll go Verstappen.
Who have you got, Sam?
I'm going for P. Gasol, the gas man.
This is just because he's helped you in.
Oh, that's definitely
predictions.
adding a good 30% to my decision. But no, to come back from 12th, call that strategy. He was calm. His defence was incredible. He kept close to the likes of Perez, Alonso and Verstappen when that penalty landed on Perez's head. You know, no one else got that jump on him. He was there to take advantage of it. And I think that car was probably the slowest of the lot of all the cars that were fighting in that top 8. And he managed to come away with the podium. I really do think this was one of Gasly's best drives that we've seen from him. And it was great to see it happen in that new team. So, Verstappen, of course, was sensational. Alonso had a great race. Tsunoda was really, really good. The strategy was going to benefit him as well. Hamilton's comeback was fantastic, even though the kind of team was against him. There's a lot of names you can shout, I think. But for me, I think Gasly had a phenomenal race.
Shout out to Albon as well, because they didn't give him a great strategy. He also had to do 45 laps on soft tyres.
Through the wet.
Through the wet bit as well.
That fourth place still blows my mind in the qualifying.
Qualifying alone, that's a belt. On that basis, by the way, Williams are winning Monza. Because that car should not be that good at this circuit. So they're going to win Monza. It's fact. So, but yeah, another shout out for Albon, because I thought he's pretty
Although, as
decent.
Albon mentioned this weekend, they're no longer, and I quote, straight line speed merchants.
Cheers, Albon.
Part of the show.
It's great. I think take your pick from the 3 podium guys. Gasly, Alonso, Verstappen. I think all of them were deserving of this. I'll go with Gasly as well. I think it was really good the way that he was able to defend against Carlos Sainz. There were, for me, that was the best battle of the race, actually, was those two going at it. So, yeah, really defended well there for a time. And at the end of the race, his pace was pretty good, I thought. Like, he wasn't
within
dropping
5
time.
seconds.
I think it was well within 5 seconds. I think it was about 2.5 seconds.
Yeah, and that wasn't moving as well. It kind of it opened up to about 2 seconds, 2.5 seconds. Didn't really move for the last sort of 5-6 laps of the race. So, I think he made the most of the situation. So fair play to him. On the other side, worst driver of the day, Harry.
Do you want me to play the jingle?
I reckon you should knock it on there, mate.
Get in the bin. Worst driver of the day. Bin. Worst driver of the day. Bin.
You suck at driving. It's so good to sing along to.
Worst driver of the day. I'll go for. Do you know what?
Tough call.
It's a tough call. Because it was so chaotic out there. It's tough to know if anyone was just being overly bad or it was just unlucky strategy. I'll go for Nico Hülkenberg. Didn't see anything of him ever.
Just because it was boring.
Yeah. He's the worst driver the most boring driver of the day.
Most boring driver
Nico
of the
Hülkenberg.
day.
But yeah, I don't think there was. I mean, Logan Sargent's, I guess, a shout for crashing, although I don't know whether that was a mechanical issue. Leclerc, before we knew it was an issue, thought maybe he was worst driver of the day, but let's go Hülkenberg. Being boring.
I've got a theory about the Haas drivers that it doesn't really matter what happens. They will always find their way back to one another.
Yeah.
Magnussen
They're like magnets.
had a great strategy call where he went onto slicks early or something. He went
called
early.
both tyre choices perfectly.
Flew up the order, and then you just see him disappear down the timing board until he's back down with Hülkenberg again.
That car is so bad as a race car.
It's
terrible
it just
race
doesn't-
car.
Hulkenberg can qualify 10 positions ahead. Magnussen can have a good strategy decision. Doesn't matter. In 5 laps' time, they will be next to each other
15th
on
and
the track.
16th again.
I really enjoyed the fact that they both smashed off their new front wings during during Saturday,
We've rung out.
and then they had Gunther Steiner on the pit wall, who was fuming.
We spent money on those. We've rung out now.
Fuming.
Worst driver of the day, Sam.
I'm going Charles Leclerc.
Oh, yeah, damage.
Yeah, but I think the incidents were his fault that caused both sets of damage.
Fair point. He did drive into Norris.
Drove into him. He also caused the run across the gravel, which is what damaged his floor. That was his fault. He wasn't quick even before the damage.
He did crash yesterday.
I'm not blaming him for the strategy call. That's not part of this decision. He crashed in qualifying, which caused him to be further back than he needed to be. I know that doesn't count into worst driver of the day, but he's just not been good. He was outdriven by Carlos Sainz, and quite comfortably so, even before damage occurred. So, I do think that out of all the Top Guns, he was Goose, not Maverick today.
Nice.
I'm going with I'm going with Sergio Perez here. And I just think to have the right strategy call the first time around, to go from that, an 11-second or 12-second lead or whatever it was, to go from that to off the podium, that's rough. Certainly after the first round of pit stops, he should not have finished any lower than second. Third at an absolute push, but really, he lost the position to Alonso due to an error. He hit the wall coming into the pits. Again, an error. Got a bit lucky that the red flag gave him some time to have a look at that. Had the 5-second penalty. There was a lot that didn't go his way when really he was put in a good spot. So I'll go with Perez, I'm afraid.
Fair.
And then lastly, big brain strap.
I mean, I'm going for the no tyre pit stop. I'm sorry.
You're getting in there first.
I'm getting in there first. I'm taking it. It was hilarious to watch. The rant will probably make it to our social medias, where both me and Harry are both amused and bewildered by what was going on. Yeah, how do you run a pit stop without any tyres in your hands? I don't know. Genuinely, the definition of a pit stop is to change the tyres. So, yeah, for me, that really takes the cake.
Nice.
What about you, Harry?
I'll probably go for, we've already talked about it, but the Mercedes being the last, or Hamilton being the last one to go on Inters, that's a bad old call. That was not a great one.
Together, Mercedes, come on.
Yeah, so I'll go for that one.
I am going to go for a decision that probably wasn't actually a decision, but I'd just like to think it's funny if it did actually happen, which was Fernando Alonso seemed to be on the back of Max Verstappen in that last stint. And then he wasn't. And Sergio Perez was right behind him. And I'd just like to think that he was holding Perez up. So he was going to get the most out of that 5-second time penalty. I don't think he actually did it. But if anyone was going to be wise enough to do that, it would have been Fernando Alonso. I'd just like to think of him in the car like, I can see Gasly in the distance there. Just hold him up a little bit. See if Sainz and Hamilton come along as well. Probably didn't happen. But
Well, you bring that up, but when you think about it, Alonso's next person in the championship is Sergio Perez.
Yeah.
Well, that's a very good point.
I would not put it past Fernando Alonso to think into the points tally of the championship to deliver that.
That was going on in my mind.
Yeah.
After the race, he said as well, I did think about challenging Max, but then I I think Max had the pace, but maybe that's what he meant. It was just...
How do I get second in the championship? By hurting Perez rather than beating Verstappen.
I like that.
You know what, Ben? That's a good call.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll take our last break. Moment of the races on the other side. Okay, we've got some Discord submission moment of the races, but we'll start with our 3 submissions. Harry, what was your moment of the race? Trying to pick one is going to be difficult, I'm sure.
It is very difficult.
A lot going on. The one that I still think is my favourite is Logan Sargent crashing off team radio. Are you okay? No, I've crashed.
That's a good one.
He's so real for that.
So real.
Yeah, that made me chuckle a lot. And obviously then he proceeds to just sit under a hut for the remainder of the race. Doesn't want to go back.
Why didn't he go back?
I don't know.
All the red flags he could have got back.
The fact that he was still there in the second red flag, or I guess not second red flag, but the second bit of rain when we had the red flag was bewildering. Go back to the pit,
enjoyed
mate.
it. Comfy.
Just having a good time. So yeah, that's mine.
Sam?
I'm going for the poo-inducing George Russell moment.
So true.
We both of us let out such an inaudible shout when that happened. We thought, that's it, both Mercedes are gone in an instant there. It was both confusing why he was trying that much to stay in front of Lewis and scary and terrifying, but also so dramatic and entertaining. And I'm sure there needs to be a clean-up on aisle 3.
Yeah, I'm sure.
My one is a little bit of an obscure one, and it is relevant only to those that were, I'm afraid, listening to Sky's commentary. But it was when, at the red flag situation, Carlos Sainz's race engineer was talking to Carlos Sainz about the weather and basically saying that this is going to happen in 10 minutes' time. And then as soon as the radio message ended, David Croft went, oh, yeah, that's basically what we just said. And Bernie Collins delivered what was my line of the weekend, which was just, yeah, they probably just heard that, so just went with what we said. You think that little of Ferrari strategy team that they
Listening
have
to
just
They're
heard what you
tapped
said
into-
on comms
they're
and
tapped
gone,
into
yeah,
the comms box.
that sounds all right.
David Croft is our new race engineer. He's our race
Yeah.
strategist.
I just like the idea that Ferrari was sat there listening to Sky's commentary and going, oh, should we relay that to the drivers? Yeah.
Just at this point, just plug them into the feed.
And sorry for people that don't get the Sky commentary, but going back to the slightly British biased commentary today, in that red flag period as well, Crofty again starts to talk about how Hamilton could have an advantage here because he's got a fresh set of soft tyres. Have you looked at the circuit? When are they using soft tyres in the next 7 laps?
That man
it's a bit
sometimes
wet.
is infuriating.
Clutching at straws.
Literally,
Talking about DRS.
what are you on about? There's a deluge outside. It's monsoon weather.
Block reduction system, maybe?
Yeah. Quack, quack, mother flippers.
Well done. Okay.
Yeah, well saved.
Good.
Well, that's what we think. But what do our submitters think? That is the question.
Here we go, folks. Right, first up, dumb electrician.
Hey boys, dumb electrician here. My moment of the race was when Sergio Perez came in for his inters, had an 11-second lead on Max. Max throws on his inters and is able to take 4 seconds a lap out every lap. The man is unbelievable and inevitable. Have a great day, boys. Bye.
Yeah, here's Thanos.
I mean, at what point is it not just Max Verstappen is that quick, but that car just ain't right for Sergio?
Yeah. Well, anyway. Sebalicious. Quality better be better this time, son.
Come on.
Yellow. My moment of the race was me
Lovely.
realizing that Mercedes have pooped the bed, that I am now sad, and that a walk in the rain to Audi to get some food would be a great idea. And you know what? Best part of the race for me.
Oh,
What was?
what was?
The walk to Aldi.
Aldi was the best part of the race.
I'm assuming
Wow.
he means as well Aldi, not Audi.
Yeah, where he can pick up some dreamy bars.
Oh, yeah, that's the rip-off Whirly bar, that is.
And the
You
fact
mean
that the
Whirly
word.
bar's the rip-off dreamy bar.
No,
Come
the
on.
Whirly bar's the rip-off Milky Way bar.
Right, next up, Joys That Kill with a 5-second submission. This is like Skylar.
Alex Albon running on 97% tires on F123.
Nice.
Severe puncture
It's a
territory.
good reference
Yeah,
there
yeah.
to the game. Oh, God, how do I say this?
Yes, Bongstra.
Yeah, it's literally Nesboonstra. Here we go.
Hey guys, this is Nick. What a crazy race. What a crazy
Told you to
time.
have Nick then.
There's the Discord. I have it open. Y'all are great. I love being on there. Moment of the race, a couple honorable mentions.
Please
would
turn
need
your
to
Discord off.
include Sad Logan.
Stop.
And Les Radio from our friend Smooth Operator there. But it has to be the dancing marshals. I mean, the crowd, you know, it is what it is. But seeing the marshals dancing, jumping up and down, getting into a conga line, peak, absolutely peak box office. Keep breaking late, guys. Thanks.
I'm going to be miserable now.
Why?
I hated the conga line marshals.
Okay.
Despised it.
Next up, provisional poultry.
Yeah, like a chicken.
Yeah, but not spelt like that.
But not definitely, only provisionally.
Provisionally poultry. Anyway, here we go.
You have beef, ham, and now poultry. My moment of the race is when Yuki Tsunoda was absolutely battling with Lando Norris. That AlphaTauri was a rocket ship today. Also, Mother Nature gave us a fantastic race at the start and at the end.
Good. Right.
That sounded too assured. You've got to be more provisional than that.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'll work on it.
That's it. That's the one.
Okay, bungers. Hopefully this works this time.
Hey there, folks.
Yay.
McLaren CEO. Yeah.
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 And the moment of the race has to be. Oh. Can I just say the entire race? Because I was, my hopes got up really, really high, and then it's like, oh, Max has got it, and then it got high again, and then I realized Max is inevitable. So I'm going to say the whole race is my moment of the race.
Do you remember when Lando Norris was P2?
Yeah,
He
it seems
started
like
on the
ages
front
ago.
row.
I'd like a Thanos-inspired helmet from Max.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Or his racing gloves to be like the Avengers glove.
Should do that. Okay, next up, Vegan Spiker.
Hey guys, Vegan Spiker. Moment of the race for the 2023 Dutch Grand Prix is Fernando Alonso. I think right at the end when he realized he couldn't catch Max and Sergio had the penalty, he had his big brain moment and decided to push Sergio back so that he would be fourth and not third. Love the podcast.
There you go.
Been listening to you, Ben.
Ben and Spiker.
God. Okay, Woody.
Let's go! Woo-hoo-hoo!
Wow.
What a race! What a race! Ay, ay, ay. Super happy.
That's not a moment of the race.
I'm Woogie. Howie.
That's the whole clip.
Great. I'm really happy for you, man.
Can you give us a moment?
He's even named it moment of the race. Anyway, well, cheers, Woody. Norm. Norm from Texas next.
Oh, hello, my late-breaking friends. After a 3-week break, with silly season not being so silly, and everything just being pent up, we finally get a release, and we get a race that just has all the chaos. And my moment of the race was George Russell coming with that angry middle manager energy.
Middle manager?
Keep breaking late, bud.
Good. It's very true. Yeah. Okay. Hybrid Ship 982. I wonder what the other 981 were doing.
Hey, it's Hybrid Ship 982
coming
at you guys live from the Dutch Grand Prix.
Hey.
The moment of the race, Fernando Alonso during the first opening laps. I'm sitting here right at the end, right at the last few corners, and I gotta say, Fernando Alonso, he had two massive moments where he could have ended up right in the barrier, but he held it. He held it, two right in a row, and he held it. Driver of the day, baby, let's go.
I'm so excited by that. He's enthusiastic.
Is he the lion that was dancing around?
He could well be. Could well be.
That poor lion.
He was in the conga.
Okay. James.
Hey, Obi boys, James is my moment of the race. My moment of the race is Logan Civilian putting it into a barrier. Terrible race for him.
Civilian.
Otherwise, other candidate would be probably the rain at the end. I mean, absolute drama. Show putting in the wall, red flag. I mean, terrible, bad, no. Also, Gasly got quite lucky. He got a 5-second time penalty for the man in front for Perez. So, podium for him. Anyways, keep breaking late and free Leclerc. It's worth it.
That was hectic, James.
Was he doing some DIY in the background?
I don't know.
Also, Logan Civilian, savage.
That is a burn.
Note to self, I'm going to say anything that I don't like in my life anymore, that it is terrible, bad, and no. That's how I'm going to describe
terrible, bad, no.
Okay, a big ham is next.
Hey boys, it's a big ham. Amazing race today. Moment of the race though is when Crofty at the end called those gorgeous trophies egg cups. Bye.
Sure.
Got some breaking news.
What's that, mate?
Kevin Magnussen has dropped to 16th place.
No.
He's been given a 5-second time penalty for dropping more than 10 car lengths behind the car ahead of him prior to restart.
That is devastating news.
Yep.
Okay, deep breaths, everyone. Next up is Faster Than Yo Mama.
Come on,
It is named Le Plan though, so this might be good, Ben.
All right.
Hey y'all, long-time listener, first-time submitter, and my sausage is fully out for Gasly. My moment of the race is when his name switched with Checo's on the graphic. Love y'all. Keep up the good work.
Cheers. Faster Than Yo Mama. Good lord. Okay. Ops dog 10 _2.
10-2.
Here we go.
Opsdog 10-2 here. My moment of the race was the love tap from Lando Norris that sent Russell tumbling from 7th to the back of the order. After such a frustrating race for Lando and George, it seemed inevitable that one of them would knock the other out. I just expected it to be on turn 1, lap 1, rather than at the end of the race. Join the Discord and the Patreon. Keep breaking late.
Well, you get on.
Doing God's work, Opsdog 10-2. Oh, sorry. I forgot how to say this. Is it Yizzy?
I don't know, mate.
Yizzy Plavenka? Sorry if that's wrong.
Hello, late breaking. My moment of the race was something I don't think I've ever seen before. So when Mercedes double stacked, the cameraman looked to get in the way as Hamilton was coming in, and like it looked like
Oh,
he
yeah.
just got shoved out the way.
Get out
I
the
wanna
way.
see another angle, but that looked pretty mad.
Good one, that.
Okay, finally, last but not least, Shane99.
What's up, boys? Shane from New York. Just so excited to see another race where we had another exhilarating fight for first, and Charles Leclerc ran off in the distance at the end with another great... Well, no, that's not what happened. Moment of the race, probably Pierre Gasly almost getting forced into the wall by Max Verstappen, and everybody just being like, yep, cool. Love you, boys.
That's exactly what Sam said.
That is what I said. I've actually lost so much energy after all that. There was so many.
That was a lot. Cheers, though, everyone. If you didn't get on, sorry, but there was about 1 billion of you.
The most I think we've ever had.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's probably right. You're right, Sam. We're absolutely wiped, but we'll be back midweek, won't we?
Oh, yes. We're finally back reviewing races, and we're going to be here for the Italian masterclass. What about this Monza, right? The Temple of Speed, that's what we're calling it, where I imagine that Williams are going to turn up without any wings whatsoever, and they will be straight line speed merchants. Stick with us. We're going to be back, as we said, midweek. We're going to be talking all things preview, other F1 debates, topics. We might have a little game at the end for you to come and play. And if you want to get involved sooner, get into the Discord. You could do a submission. You could be on the podcast yourself. We've also got Patreon, where you get 2 extra episodes every single month, and you get Beer We're Breaking, and you get a little birthday shout out. We've just done the August ones. That was Choco Drizzle's birthday, and of course our very own Benjamin Hocking did those. We actually did it on time. Well done, us. Yeah, thanks so much. We're on social media as well, Late Breaking F1, absolutely everywhere. And if you want to get subscribed on the UpTub, that is also Late Breaking F1, where you can watch this entire episode in video format.
Yes.
That's good, isn't it?
Yeah, very good.
Please subscribe. We desperately need the video views. In the meantime, I've been Samuel Sage.
I've been Ben Hocking.
And I've been Harry Eade.
And remember, keep breaking late.